Alright, Victorum Gaming fans, we are back and we have another SPQR video here. This is part of our ongoing series where we're covering all the different scenarios for the game, and our last series covered Britain, so we're kind of moving right along sort of alphabetically with the various factions here. So next up are is the Caesar's Legions. So their three missions are basically called Unleash Hell, Hold the Line, and Foraging. Unleash Hell kind of from Gladiator there, although probably would have made more sense than to put this under the Imperial Roman missions, but no big deal. So, Unleash Hell, what do we got here? So, just from the map here, obviously we see a pretty large defender area and the slightly smaller Rome deployment zone with a 12-inch gap in between. So, let's take a look here. Both players have warbands of equal denarii, as is pretty much standard. The enemy player is the defender. Caesar's Legion player is the attacker. Okay. Not a bad deal there. As you might expect, then, let's see, setup. The defending player places up to 5 pieces of terrain in his deployment zone. These could either be buildings to represent a village or farm, or hills and woodland to represent a campsite. He then deploys all of his models. The Roman player then deploys all of his models, and the Roman player has the first phase. So this is one of those that certainly favors the Roman player. Again, you get to the defender does get to play around a little bit with the terrain and hopefully, deploy that to their advantage without, sort of being cheaty about it. But overall, they should probably try to put some obstacles in the Roman player's way, maybe some woods and stuff like that, just to not get overrun. And here it would probably be wise as the defender, depending on what the Roman player's going to be fielding. Again, you got to keep in mind they have the first turn, so there's just no way around that. But you might not want to deploy all the way up on your deployment edge then, if the Roman player is bringing like cavalry or something like that with some mobility. 12 inches is certainly doable with the right equipment and talents and stuff like that, depending on the heroes, where the Roman player, despite their small deployment zone, could actually surge forward pretty significantly. So some things to think about there for the defender. Now, that being said, the defender does have to put all their stuff on the table, so deploy all their models, and so that will give the Roman player a good idea of not just what the defender is bringing, but how they're set up and maybe some insight into their game plan. Then the Roman player gets to deploy all their stuff to hopefully their best advantage, and then they will also get the first phase. And so knowing that, obviously that should tie into their deployment as well. So, okay, so with that in mind, then, special rules for the scenario. So the defending forces have been caught off guard by the Roman sudden advance and are not prepared for a fight. They may perform no actions in the first turn. So we'll pause right there and just reread that. The defending forces have been caught off guard by the Roman sudden advance and are not prepared for a fight. So no actions in the first turn. So let's go right back to setup. So if you are the defender and you can't do a single thing on the first turn, doubly important then to probably not deploy close to your board edge, or not your board edge, but your front part of your deployment zone there. So it's a little bit misleading maybe that you do have that extra space compared to the Romans here. So seemingly that would probably be, if there's a 4-foot table, it's probably 24 inches, 12 and 12 there on that side. So 12 inches of neutral ground, 12 of the Roman deployment zone. Should probably be marked a little bit more clearly, but I think that's the intention there, 4x4. So again, if you're the defender, you probably do not want to be necessarily right up near that edge, unless you have some really heavy, like solid defense units, or things that can likely take a charge or take some shooting damage or whatever it might be that the Romans are throwing at you here. So you kind of want to play defensively, pun intended here, I guess, with you being a defender, but play smart and not give the Roman player sort of freebies. Basically, don't throw any of your units away just by being too close and stuff like that. Keep in mind, again, things like talents that let you maybe move 3 times, or if they bought musicians, they might just pop those on the first turn just to, again, get across the board and get in your face. So make the Romans come to you. Again, if you can't do anything the first turn, you need to plan for the subsequent turns and all that. And keep in mind, you may not even go first on the second turn with the way the dice of fate and all that works. So you might really, despite the larger deployment zone, be facing a pretty severe uphill battle. So deploying back might be a good option there, and then just waiting to see what the Roman player does, and then hopefully trying to counteract that. All right, moving on with the special rules. Okay, at the start of each of the defender's subsequent phases, roll a dice for each of his units. Add +1 if the unit is a hero or is led by one, and an additional +1 for every turn after the second. If a unit rolls total of 6 or more, it may start performing actions in that phase. Otherwise, the unit may do nothing as it scrabbles about in a panic for weapons and armor. If such a unit is engaged in close combat, it may start performing actions normally. So this is very, very rough for the defender. So again, sort of extra punishment here. Now, granted, again, as I said earlier, if you have units that can, possibly take a charge and not just melt, although again, you are facing Roman troops, so they're going to do their thing in close combat. So whether it's the legionnaires or the cavalry, or possibly any mercenaries they might be bringing, so they're definitely going to punish you and do their work in close combat. The Roman list isn't one that's necessarily going to shoot you off the board, even if they had a scorpion or something like that. Those aren't necessarily that great. But yeah, getting stuck in close combat, sure, you'll get to fight back, start performing actions normally, but if you've already taken a charge and are getting wailed on, you might not be able to sustain those losses for very long, and then you're already behind on sort of like not necessarily model count, but the damage you've taken and trying to come back and deal with that, on top of not being able to do anything in your first turn anyway. So this is pretty rough. So now you can't necessarily game plan for the mission, but obviously this would probably be good for games where you have multiple heroes that can be leading your units and stuff like that, just to hopefully get that 6, so you can start acting normally and start cobbling together some sort of defense here as the Romans try to advance on you and sort of seemingly ambush you here. So going back to what we talked about with deployment here, so again, aside from units led by heroes, it might really be worth, again, deploying fairly far back and just giving yourself at least a turn or two of trying to get your units equipped, essentially, and mobile, so that you can start acting and dealing with the oncoming Romans. So, and then victory conditions. Victory will go to the warband that manages to completely destroy or drive off its enemy. So a little bit of a different flavor here on sort of a kill-em-all mission. So either side can win with that victory condition, so it's not different victory conditions there. But again, this is certainly, just from the description here, virtually entirely in the Romans' favor. So now we talked about the defender mainly. Now, if you're the Roman player, knowing the advantages that you have, you really should be as aggressive as possible here. Don't waste time trying to get cute or creative or something like that. Do what the Romans do. Bring those legionaries forward, cavalry if you got it. Maybe if you're playing mercenaries, that will give you some other options. But you, considering that they can't do anything on the first turn, and hopefully again you've chosen a good deployment, you are getting across the board. And if the enemy wasn't too smart about their deployment, you might be engaging on the first turn, and hopefully dealing as much damage as you can before they can start reacting back. But if they deployed pretty far away from you, getting to them as fast as possible might just be the best option there. So if you've taken musicians and stuff like that, or have talents that let you get 3 actions or possibly even more in a turn, getting across the board and just getting those charges off against the opponent, I think, will be the key to success for you here as the Roman player. Again, the more of their units that activate and get to act as normal, then obviously that starts creating more sort of heads-up fights for you. And then, it's usual sort of gameplay tactics and stuff like that. And, of course, hopefully the dice gods are with you. But as we saw here, so again, if they're just having bad luck as the defender, not getting their units mobile, you can kind of pick and choose your fights and try to double team various units just to, again, maximize that Roman advantage. So this first mission, again, unleash hell for the Caesar's legions, for the Romans, obviously. Pretty nasty, very, very, very heavily favored for the Romans. But if you're playing a campaign or something like that, great, flavorful mission. The Romans trying to ambush one of their various adversaries. And if you're the defender, yeah, the cards are certainly stacked against you, but victory is definitely sweet if you could pull that off and give the Romans a bloody nose here as the defender, considering they have so many of the cards stacked in their favor. So hope you guys enjoyed this little look at that first Caesar's Legion mission or scenario, whatever you want to call it, for SPQR. And then stay tuned for the rest of them. Will be coming out shortly. And if you guys like the video, get us a like and a subscribe if you haven't already. And then we'll see you in the next one.